right, we are going to head and get started. And I want to thank everyone for coming out to our very first workshop on designing a winning teaching portfolio. In this first workshop, we're just going to cover teaching style, DI statement, and philosophy. And I'll be joined by Shari, our DI director. She's going to cover a few of the topics here, and I will cover the philosophy, the last one. So, all right. So what is the value of a teaching portfolio? Well, for one, it showcases how your teaching skills are aligned with your values and philosophy related to your learning, teaching and learning. Second, your portfolio allows you to reflect on your teaching development. And thirdly, it helps us with our accreditation for the college and the university. With our programs looking for accreditation, whether it's ABET or AUPHA, they want to know who our instructors are. And so having a teaching portfolio allows us to display the wonderful work and the awesomeness of our instructors. But before I jump into our next slide, I do have a quick poll. And so I want to, if you wouldn't mind answering the poll for me. Let's see. Poll. Okay. All right. So teaching portfolio, the question is, do you have a teaching portfolio? Yes, if you have one. I've started one, but it needs a little work. And no, I don't have one. All right. So here we are, show the results. So there were 3 of you that have one, a few that started but needs a little work, and then the majority of you don't have one. So for those of you who have a portfolio, please share any tips, any recommendations, your knowledge of the portfolios with the rest of us. And for those who this is your first time, please feel free to ask any questions you have. This is a time for you to learn and to help develop your own portfolio. So please use the chat feature to ask any questions that you have. And before we go any further, I forgot to ask, please introduce yourself in the chat with your name and what course or courses you teach so that we get a chance to know who's here. Because I imagine that not everyone knows each instructor in our 3 different UAPS programs and our individualized degree programs. I found this teaching portfolio flowchart in my research to discover how to create your winning teaching portfolio. And today we're just going to cover like the teaching philosophy statement, but in our future workshops, we're going to cover the data, like what else goes into it, the material that you need to gather from your students, from your colleagues that talk about you as an instructor and the work that you do. So like I said, today we're just going to cover the teaching philosophy. At this moment, I am going to turn over to Shari.
Good morning, everybody. I hope you can hear me. I have a lot of allergy stuff going on, so I'm sipping some tea, so I hope that helps. So I, in my beginning conversations with Tony, I thought it would be a good idea to start with some conversation around styles, recognizing that our styles shift with our location, age, experience in teaching, and et cetera. But as a beginning conversation around how we define your teaching style, and these are Shari's definitions. Your teaching style is the guiding foundation or the theme for your teaching portfolio. And as you'll see, teaching portfolios tend to have multiple sections. But when you think about the theme guiding that, it should be your style. Again, recognizing that one's teaching style shifts with location, experience, etc. Additionally, it's an ever-evolving, your contextual educational guidelines and principles for folks who like theories and perspectives and approaches for how you manage the classroom, how you assess, and that sort of thing. It ultimately shapes the teaching goals. So teaching style and teaching goals are not the same. And as we all know, right, the English language tends to use lots of words when we intend one thing, but need another. So the teaching styles, again, are your foundational themes, the why, and your goals are why you chose to teach as a summary. Thanks, Tony. And depending on there's lots of folks out there who really dig this kind of information, who write a lot about the prominent teaching styles, or sometimes you'll see the types of teaching styles. These are sort of the six general. Some authors say there's five. There's some authors out there that will say there's seven, and some of these are connected as one, but these are some general that I thought I would share, and maybe we can get a sense of where we all fall. The style that's more authoritarian, and this is not a negative, right? This is um, folks who sort of have a command of the classroom. And when I say classroom, that's online and physical, brick and mortar, who primarily focus on oral lectures. Students are taking notes, memorizing key facts. That's not a bad thing, right? So a lot of STEM courses, this would make sense. The style that has folks leaning more into being the delegator, those instructors, teachers tend to move more into promoting community building, right? So they're more collaborative. They have examples, small group assignments and projects where the students are working together more than the instructor is lecturing. The facilitator, again, and these are, you'll see some bleeding in, if you will. The facilitator in the classroom tends to pose questions often, right? So this could even be in a lecture, right? What did you glean from the readings? Those sorts of questions, and encourages critical thinking, problem solving. And again, there can be a facilitator delegator style, right? You can combine some of these. These are just sort of how it's broken out. This flipped style is relatively new, and sometimes some authors will say flipped and hybrid are similar, and they have really, a lot of authors are really extending the definition of flipped and hybrid as we've moved more into online, in particular post the sort of beginning of COVID. But the teaching style that's defined as flipped, those are instructors who tend to lean into flipping the roles, if you will, between the instructor and the student. And those instructors will share the lecture, share the content ahead of time, ask the students, get students feedback. Is this a good delivery method? How should we move forward in this content? And then just to move down to hybrid, since they're similar, instructors who move into that teaching style also tend to personalize the curriculum and instruction based on students' needs. And so you'll see how flipped and hybrid is similar here. And I would add, perhaps we all should have some element of hybrid in our teaching styles. And so this is not just when we receive, say, a letter of accommodation. It could be what's happening globally. If we are mostly online and we're trying to teach content that is hands-on, like how can we adapt the curriculum to students' needs? And the balance between, how we're comfortable delivering the content with what students need. And then the demonstrator, the last of the six, has some combination of oral lectures, and not just oral lectures, but lectures that show up recorded and students watch, and hands-on opportunities in the classroom. So that's just a really brief summary, and I gave Tony some resources at the end of this. Tony, will you share this out?
Yes.
Okay. If folks want to dig deeper into those. Some things to remember, none of these are wrong. In particular, some of the names like demonstrator or authoritarian, I think folks Most folks wouldn't want to be associated with that. But if the content you're delivering requires, a lot of information to be given to the students, and students have to take notes, and students have to memorize equations, that sort of thing, that's important. Neither is better than the other. And again, most of us have some combination of more than one style. And you've heard me mention how context matters. Again, the subject matter you teach matters. And folks have heard me talk about our visible and not so visible identities, right? In particular, if it's related to the content that we're teaching. As an example, I have a history of teaching about race, in particular whiteness. I am not white. And so that sort of has it plays a part in how I deliver content at predominantly white institutions with white students. My own and your own higher ed experience matters. And perhaps you have some instructors, some colleagues who you've heard say, well, I had to learn this way, and so I want students to learn, or my way of having learning was the best way. Not necessarily a bad thing, but we are influenced by how well or how not so well our higher ed experiences were. And of course, whether or not we're teaching grad students, undergraduate students, professional development workshops for folks who are perhaps in the room who are not in the credit side of CCAPS matters, as well as our teaching status. Folks who are tenure tracked, which CCAPS doesn't have, but that does matter. And whether or not you are teaching a course, one workshop contract, adjunct, that sort of thing, it matters the way in which you deliver the information, the time you have, right, to create community in the classroom and that sort of thing. So those are just some points to remember around your style. Was
And I
that?
apologize, Shaq. We do
Okay.
have a question. It says
Oh, great.
from Jeff. It says he finds that he uses multiple styles based on the needs of each student. Is that
Yeah,
common?
very common. Yep, I think that's very common. And I think if you're thinking about, Jeff, your overall theme style for your portfolio, you can say that you've combined some, but generally, if I think about mine, and Tony, can you go back, I think, 2 slides? Okay, I'm sorry, one forward. I generally say that I'm a delegator facilitator, and then I'll have a note sort of at the top of my teaching style theme of my portfolio, that shifts if I'm teaching undergraduate students or graduate students. It also has shifted, to be honest, whether or not I'm in the Midwest or on the East Coast. Geopolitical things also matter. Any other questions about style from folks, though? Or comments? Thoughts?
Um, I, Shari, I'm hung up on something you said 30 seconds ago when you said you adapt your teaching style to the geography.
Yeah,
Um,
I do.
I don't want to go down a rat hole, but I'm really interested in knowing about that
Okay.
because I suspect I may see that once in a while, depending on where my students are from.
Oh, yeah. So I was born in the Midwest, Carl, but I spent a lot of my teaching time in Boston. And my assessment of the geo and political environment of the East Coast in the classroom is that a lot of students were more direct, more willing to directly tackle challenging conversations. And remember, I'm teaching race, right? So here, when I've returned here, sometimes I experience that, but a lot of times I experience trepidatiousness or hesitancy to name direct things around race. And so I've had to shift that. And so folks might have noticed, I think I did teach a workshop here around race. I had more examples, I had more breakout sessions, right? Because it was sort of brought to my attention that folks will be more comfortable talking about race in small groups as opposed to 40 people in a large environment. And so just adapting the ways in which I was sharing the content in that way. Now that's a huge generalization, right? Because there are a lot of folks in the Midwest willing to have more direct conversations, but that's been my experience.
Okay. Yeah. I noticed that in my day
Yeah.
job years and years
Yeah.
ago too, but interesting to hear that. Thank you.
Yeah. Is there a form or a format? Hi, Bill. There's so many. And if folks want to see mine, all you need to do is email me and ask me, and I can send it. I'm old school, so folks should know I went to grad school before there were all the bells and whistles of online sort of websites. But there are, people can have domains, if you will. A lot of folks have them digital. Mine is just a PDF. I would advise being a bit more creative than that. I'm just not creative.
And Bill, we're actually trying to find a place that can host or hold our portfolios. And so this is just the first of the workshop so that you can begin working on the philosophy. So getting it either on a Google or Word doc. And hopefully by our third workshop, before our third workshop, we'll have a place that we can provide our faculty as a host for all their material.
Yeah, that's a good question, though, Bill. You're welcome. All right, Tony, am I next still?
I have a question.
Oh, hi, Colin.
Hello. Um, my preference is a mix of authoritarian facilitator and flipped. And so in the fall, I'll be having the opportunity to teach my first two classes. Just culturally speaking, what does flip work? Given that most of our students in ITI are from East Africa, West Africa. East Africa. Would a flipped approach typically work? And this is for anyone that has taught in that style. Given that they do the upfront work and then we have discussion in the classroom.
Good question. Anybody?
I'll give a little bit of feedback on that because I've tried it on and off, and I'm not going to lay all this on the students' plate because I think I can also do better as I learn. But one of the things I noticed, Colin, was some of the topics are so complicated that when I tried to flip them and give the students some work to do in the classroom and then to come back and to talk about it or work outside the classroom, they didn't understand enough about it to do enough. So that we just got back to a classroom where we ended up making it, to use your category of 6, it turned back into authoritative lecture because the students didn't know enough going into it. They worked for it on 15 minutes and said, this is too complicated. I don't know what to do. I'll wait till we go back to class. So that's part of a failure on my part to not realize the difficulty of the material before I assigned it as an independent thing for the students. So in that way, I can say it wasn't successful. It's a work in progress for me.
Thank you.
Sherry, can I make a comment too? It's Jeff Kaufman. I team teach in one of my courses, and it's an in-class course. And both the other professor and I think have very similar styles. We're kind of hybrid facilitator demonstrator, which I think works really well for these are seniors in their last semester. But I also teach in the graduate school, and sometimes I find myself butting heads with the full-time faculty. I've been teaching at the U for, I hate to admit, 48 years, but as an adjunct. And some of the full-time profs are very heavy theory and have never been practitioners in the field. And they have more of that authoritarian style and are teaching the theory and those kinds of things. And my arguments are that, gee, it works in practice. I wonder if it works in theory. And so I don't really, I think some people take it as good-heartedness and other people maybe take it a little personally. Do you have any thoughts about how somebody who has a very, very different teaching style, who sometimes team teaches, in this case in the graduate school, can do a better job of blending or making that work for students? Because I think they see it and feel it too.
Oh, that's a tough one. I mean, I haven't team taught a lot, but I did team teach during my time in Smith, and the person I was team teaching was very much about lecturing. And we just had conversations around sort of splitting the time, if you will, where she would do the lecture and I was the practice.
Okay.
Uh, and that worked because it allowed her to do what felt most comfortable for her. And folks, and also to address what Colin was asking, it also had students who needed the definitions, that sort of the theoretical part to receive that. And then we would have a break and then we come back and say, okay, now it's time to practice what Mary Moore, that was her name, just reviewed, and that worked.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. I think trying to sway her because I think I did that the first 2 years. Like my style's really better. Didn't work. And then at the third year, I said, "Oh, why don't we just split?" Because we were in a 3 credit course, and so there was an hour and a half, and we split it that way.
Okay. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Can I add? This is exciting to me. I love this when we really get into the discussion of pedagogy. So when I first started as a instructor professor, my style was strictly authoritarian, and as I learned my audience being primarily millennials and Gen Zs, I saw that just a strict authoritarian lecture approach really didn't work.
Yep.
And then with the coming of COVID, it even got to be more challenging. And so that's when I flipped and started doing the facilitator flip demonstrator role, and things started to flow smoothly. So
Mhm.
as we teach these classes, how much attention do we pay to the generations of the students?
I think thank you for that, Colin. We always have to pay attention to the students. When I think about the sort of practice way examples that I bring, this is a really good example of how instructors should also always be learning. So I'm not a person who is on social media, but I've had to learn that. I've had to learn about podcasts. I've had to learn about different ways in which students are learning and receiving information and add that to my practice. Absolutely, we should pay attention to the generations. And I think so this is an example of one's teaching style. In the classroom, I'm sharing who I am. So I always share to students, I'm X, I think. And I can never remember which letter. And so I'll explain to students, look, I went to school where we had one large computer in this graduate program. We all shared it. This is circa 1980s, so that they have a sense of understanding. I'm heavy in history and experience, and also learning from them around technology, and even now AI, I'm having to learn about that, right? Even though I'm a bit afraid of it, right? And so finding the balance, absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up.
And I like to add that these styles can change according to the need of the students, but I think that we should be able to adapt all these styles and try to blend into some teaching approach in which we can take some of those styles and then maybe become a facilitator or demonstrator or flip the class or something like that. And then there should be some structure in the class which all students should follow. Those are the policies which we should able to enforce. And overall, we like to create a good experience for our students and also push ourselves to learn new approach and learn new technology or different type of the tools. So this is a teaching and also a learning process for all of us, I believe.
Thank you, Nazrat. Yes, agreed. Great, thank you. I think I'm moving to the statement now, right, Tony? Great. All right, so what is a DEI statement? So, folks have applied for positions, in particular higher ed. A lot of folks are asking for those. And since my arrival here, we've not asked for a DEI statement. Again, the context matters. We are at a publicly funded land grant institution. I've not quite been able to figure out if we can require it or not. I'm not sure. I keep hearing, well, I don't know. But this is what a DEI statement is, and not necessarily for hiring, but for your teaching portfolio. It's written, although sometimes it's spoken. I have seen DEI statements recorded, right? Again, folks being creative, in particular, folks who are teaching courses related to technology. It's a reflective statement. It addresses two things: your personal lived experience and your professional lived experiences around, and I'm saying DEI, but I mean a bunch of other concepts in there under this umbrella. Access, belonging, justice, social justice. And we've moved in a world of so not just whether or not you believe in it, agree with it, but the role of it in your teaching. I think I have a next slide, Tony. Okay, so here's some tips, and I just looked at mine and wanted to give you some tips. And again, if folks are interested, all you need to do is email me, and I'm happy to share it. Acknowledging one's historical and systemic marginalizations, and let me add, and privileges. So in my previous faculty development roles, one of the things I noticed is that folks who are primarily racialized under the BIPOC umbrella often found it, quote, easier to write a DEI statement than folks racialized as white. And so I want to bring up that DEI statements should not only be written by BIPOC folks. And this is just race, but ways in which you experience privileges and marginalizations around other identities as well. In particular, how they may influence your teaching style and how you show up in the classroom, right? So for me, I talk about age a lot, as I mentioned, around my generation, what was happening in my understanding when I say to students, for example, when I first moved here was shortly after George Floyd was murdered. And I was teaching race at the University of St. Thomas and sharing with students around Rodney King, Malice Green. And these are names, now Tony knows those names because we're both from Detroit, but a lot of students thought the George Floyd murder was like the first big thing. And I had to say, as a person nearing 60, no, it wasn't, right? That we've moved into, a lot of folks have phones now, but there used to be camcorders and a lot of things were recorded, right? So we're bringing in how age influences what I teach as an example. As does one's gender identity, sexual orientation for me, show up in the classroom as a person who's cisgender, but also queer. Students don't always know that. If I'm teaching a class around LGBTQ studies, which I have, I often share that. Now, going back to the previous slide around teaching status, that looks different, right? If folks are at particular institutions that might have understandings that might conflict with our own beliefs, you have to navigate and interrogate those on your own, as I had to do at the University of St. Thomas, which was a private Catholic institution. Second point, acknowledge your growth, right? Where were you before? Where are you now? Where are you trying to go? Like, what is your understanding, right? And how much do you want to share about, who you are in the classroom? Again, connect the lived and the professional when appropriate, right? And make connections to the students. And Colin, your really good point earlier around, who we primarily serve in CCAPS. Are there connections or disconnections to who we primarily teach and serve in CCAPS? And acknowledge those. And what's your journey to understanding about East African countries and the cultures and how students show up to the University of Minnesota? Include examples, right, of personal lessons learned and professional lessons learned. Include examples of projects that you might have led. Include your concrete ongoing action steps around your future planning, right? What's your learning? This is not to get deep into your professional development, as that's a separate folder, if you will, for your portfolio, but around your understanding of others would be included in your DEI statement. And, you know, for folks who are creative or who receive inspiration from historical and current figures and quotes and events and experiences, feel free to add that. And Tony, if you can go to the next one. Some things to remember, DEI statements are really for a lot of folks where we might be more vulnerable than we generally are in the classroom, right? Because you're using I statements, you're talking about yourself. It's telling your story, not someone else's story, right? So a lot of times folks tend to write statements around being inspired and sort of getting into somebody else's story. Tell your story. Be creative, and be honest. My DEI statement, my mother is a quilter, um, a very good quilter and sort of nationally known quilter. And I chose to write my statement as threads of a quilt, right? Just to be creative. My father was a Panther, and I sort of wrap all of that together. I've seen DEI statements where folks have talked about being a conductor of an orchestra, you're sort of writing different notes, right? Be creative so that it stands out. And did I have another one, Tony, or is that it on that?
I think that might be it.
Okay. So
Okay.
any comments or questions about DEI statements from folks? And have folks thought about these? Anybody written one before?
I'm saying no.
I see that, yeah.
Okay.
So folks can feel free to reach out if you should choose to include those. Again, this isn't a required part of a teaching portfolio, but it is something that a lot of folks are starting to ask for. A lot of accrediting bodies are starting to require anti-racist content and curriculums. And so this is a great way for deans and folks who are moving into the hiring to have a sense of understanding your commitment, your knowledge, and your skills to DEI and teaching.
All right.
Great.
All right. Well, thank you, Shari.
You're welcome.
Shari covered your teaching style and your DEI statement, and so working on that. Now I'm going to cover the philosophy. So creating your teaching philosophy. Imagine many of you have one, but never probably have written it down and thought about, oh, what is my actual teaching philosophy? So here's a little quote I want to share first. The teaching philosophy is a written statement that communicates your beliefs about teaching and learning and includes evidence from your teaching to show how you translate those beliefs into practice. Your students want to know the evidence. How do your beliefs show up in class? How do you communicate that to them? So, the teaching philosophy, it should be 1 to 2 pages in length. It has disciplinary context. You can include scholarly references, and as Sherry mentioned, being creative, so using like headers and subheaders in your document, providing quotes and images, those quotes that you find reflect your beliefs as an instructor. The images again that just show your philosophy. So belief statements. What are your beliefs about teaching? Your beliefs about learning, and your beliefs about knowledge. So taking time to really think through those things, your teaching, learning, and knowledge. And what do belief statements do? They provide a rationale for your teaching practices. They help you uncover your purpose and localize your teaching in your context. Again, students want to know, like I said, students are going out and trying to find out who their instructors are before they register for a class. I know we have required classes, but many students are, of course, because they are savvy on the internet and they're looking up if you have a LinkedIn profile, if you have a Facebook profile. Students are kind of looking up, rate my teacher, because they want to know who you are as an instructor. And your teaching, your beliefs, and your philosophy statement will help them see who you are. How to uncover your beliefs. Okay. Thinking about what matters most to me in teaching and learning. And as you think about strategies I use in teaching, what do they say about your beliefs? And then finally, what do I want readers to remember about my beliefs? Any conversation or discussion on any of these ways to uncover your beliefs? Well, I'll start with the first one. Someone tell me, what matters most to you about your teaching and learning? Anyone want to jump in?
I think for me is being vulnerable with our students too, in a sense that they can see that I'm learning at the same time as I'm teaching. I think that's really important to continue to evolve. And, with every cohort, things are different. So to me is just being genuine, um, almost vulnerable, like I
Hmm.
said, but in a way that there's still that professional, I don't want to call it barrier, but professional line, if you would. Um, but yeah, just to know that I'm genuine and that I'm also learning as I
Yeah.
go from them.
Thank you, Francis.
I think for me, it's talking about why you're taking the course.
Hmm.
And the reason why you're taking the course is to make sure that the people that work at this place go home to their family or anybody else and live to be work another day. And you have the opportunity to be part of that mission. And that's why I teach. And I think I try to make that clear to the people that are doing it.
Thanks, yeah. Yeah, I think it's important for the students to know why you teach.
I think it's important, Tony, to connect with students where they are. We have a broad base of abilities in our classroom, and I want people to know that what we're learning from where you start, not from where we expect you to be.
Hmm.
So some people may have a larger curve than others, but I want them to know that I'm willing to start where they are, not expect them to jump to something that's beyond them to begin with.
Well, thanks, Janine.
For me, what's important to me is growth and change.
Hmm.
So when you teach the class at the beginning of the semester, and then you see the significant or hope for the significant change and growth towards the end of the semester. And so that's always encouraging for me and ultimately for the students when you really see that the light bulb is on as we go through the course of the class.
I like that, Colin. I don't think a student should start the class and finish the class as the same person. I hope that's not the case.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I believe for me, teaching it means that I'm continuously learning and improving my skills and my knowledge. So also sharing that with my students and also learning from them. So it's like a continuous two-way learning and improvements on both sides.
Yeah, thank you, News. Right. Yeah, I think it's valuable for our students to know that, you know what, as an instructor, I'm learning as well. And, Francis mentioned that as well, but that my 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 desire for learning hasn't stopped. My passion for wanting to know new things and passing that on to the students as well. Thank you, everyone. Here's an example how to write or example of a belief statement. As I assume that all my students are capable of developing leadership skills and that they will be prepared to take on managerial roles and lead construction teams effectively. I use construction management as an example here. So the belief is all my students can develop leadership skills. And second part is all my students will be able to manage and effectively lead construction teams. Now, the readers, they want evidence. Your students want evidence, or readers of your your philosophy, want to see evidence of your teaching style. Excuse me, of your teaching beliefs. Excuse me. Um, Illustrate how you operationalize your beliefs and captures what your teaching looks like now. And here's an example of that. So I demonstrate my respect for my students' abilities by giving them challenging assignments and push them to practice and hone their leadership skills. In my experience, with enough support, students are capable of rising to the challenge, step into leadership roles, and manage challenging and difficult work. Yeah, sorry. So the evidence in that one would be giving your students challenging assignments. So they should be able to see that and know that these assignments are going to stretch them and push them to new levels. And then you're giving them the opportunity to practice and hone those leadership skills throughout your courses. Anyone have any examples of things they do in their classes? Show evidence who they are as an instructor.
Hey Scott, this is Mick. I'll share that I have a format that kind of explains to the students at the beginning of the class, and then we, go back to it again and again to help reinforce. And it kind of sets stages. I just call it building up into leaders and developing their creative skills, developing their innovation skills, and then developing their leadership skills. And those can be broken down into subsets, and we cover a lot of territory. And again, I have a lot of different levels of capability in between the students when we start, and we do, I go use all the different styles that were listed. And I really am a believer in the hybrid, where you need to know what the students are needing before you adapt to, deliver what they need to be successful and prepare them for the future.
And thanks, Mick. I like the ideal of, like I said, you give it to them at the beginning of the term, but you're revisiting throughout the term, and so reinforcing
Right.
the ideals of what they're learning throughout the term. So that helps and strengthen. That shows, like I said, that's the evidence of you as an instructor.
Mhm.
Anyone else before we move on? As Shari mentioned, so that kind of concludes the formal portion of our workshop. Here are some of the resources that Shari used and I use in developing this workshop, and so we'll share these, or I'll share these with everyone. But before I move on, are there any questions, any things we need more clarification on, or things you want to share in your experience?
Tony, this is Rajan.
Hey, Rajan.
Hi. I think a lot of like the teaching styles, teaching philosophy, and DEI statement are really important parts of a teaching portfolio. But I think that there are other sort of logistical critical components that need to be added to a portfolio. And some of these might be simplistic, but when I do a teaching portfolio, the first thing I include is my CV. So that's part of the portfolio. I include in that CV the list of courses, workshops, and other educational activities that I've done. I also include a sample syllabus in my teaching portfolio. And then if you have any descriptive or evaluative materials, so for example, SRTs, I also include to show sort of students' rating of my teaching. So I think the crafting of the teaching style, philosophy, and the DEI statement, they require sort of a lot of kind of thinking and conceptualization. But then there are just these components that you can pull together that you likely already have to create sort of a comprehensive portfolio.
Yeah. And thank you, Ray John. And so that kind of goes into my next slide, workshop number 2. supporting material. So which will be whether the publications you've been in, awards you've won, let's say your syllabus, uh, kudos and reviews from feedback from students and colleagues. And so we're going to discuss that at our second workshop, and also have opportunity. Hopefully by then some of you will have started working on teaching philosophy and having opportunity to meet in smaller groups just to share what you worked on and get any feedback and support from other instructors and ways to improve it. And then the last workshop will be pulling it all together. So putting this portfolio together so that it's something that you feel is reflective of you as instructor. And I see Francis, you raise your hand. Go ahead, Francis.
Hi, yeah, I'm sorry because I stepped out for a couple of minutes earlier on, so I don't know if this was discussed. Where would the teaching portfolio live? So the
That
teaching
is what we're
portfolio is going
trying
to
to find.
encompass a lot of stuff,
Yes.
right? So where would this live for us?
We are trying to find a spot. And so we're looking, I have some of the team from OIT are looking for a place for us. CLA has one, other colleges has a spot. It's called Works, but it fortunately doesn't work for our college as well. So we are looking for a place to house and hold all this wonderful material from our instructors.
Thank you.
And so I do plan on, like, hopefully by our next or the following workshop, have a place for us. So, and I don't know if it's Dan, are you still with us? Yeah.
Yes, I am. I've been taking notes on the kind of functional needs. So I'm Dan Kunitz. I work in CCAPS IT as a business analyst or project manager, depending on the project. And yeah, we're just trying to find a solution because all the ones that are already in use at the U that we might be able to work with a partner on seem to have some pretty severe limitations or issues that keep us from being able to use them. So we're still looking. And so I'm putting together, again, a very specific list of things that we know we need to be able to talk to some other vendors to see if they'd have something more appropriate.
All right. Thank you, Dan. First, thank you for doing the research for us. And I appreciate you scouring the university and outside to find a place for us. All right.
You bet. Yeah, you're welcome.
All right. Thank you. Any questions? Any parting thoughts before we end today's session? All right. Well, again, I thank you for taking time out this morning to meet and to discuss how to put together your teaching portfolio. Please feel free to reach out if you have questions, because I will continue to work with Dan to find a place as well as prepare for our next workshop. And again, thank you and enjoy the rest of your week. Do you have a party chat, sorry? All right, take care of it.